a podcast featuring special live events recorded at our theater located at 209 West Houston Street in downtown Manhattan. In this episode, Film Forum presents François Ozon, one of France's most prolific and dynamic filmmakers, who appeared for a Q&A October 18th at the opening night of his latest film, By the Grace of God. This acclaimed drama tells the true story of three survivors who band together to expose widespread sexual abuse in the French Catholic Church and the system that shielded and perpetuated it. The Q&A was moderated by Film Forum's premieres programmer, Mike Maggiore. By the Grace of God is now playing.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Film Forum. My name is Mike Maggiore. I do the programming with Karen Cooper of the Premieres, and I want to welcome you to the U.S. theatrical premiere of François Ozon's By the Grace of God, winner of the Silver Bear at this year's Berlin Film Festival. We are longtime admirers of François' films, going all the way back to his wonderful short films, See the Sea and A Summer Dress. We have shown one of his early features, Water Drops on Burning Rocks, and just 2 years ago we showed his film France. One of the things that I find most exciting about following François' films is that he is never predictable. And the fact that after making films like Double Lover, Swimming Pool, and Under the Sand, he's turned his prodigious talent and imagination to the subject of the French Catholic Church abuse scandal of Cardinal Barbarin and Father Préat, which is still in progress. And he handles this story of injustice with sensitivity, empathy, and a simmering sense of outrage. I'm very pleased that he's with us tonight to introduce the film to you, and he'll join us afterwards for questions. Please welcome François Ozon.
Hello, thank you for coming. I'm very happy to be back in New York to present this film. This film is very important for me and the survivors. Some people try to stop the release in France, but fortunately the film was released, and I'm very happy to be in New York with you tonight. We'll be back afterwards. Okay, have a good screening. Thank you.
Once again, please welcome writer and director François Ozon. And this is our translator, Nicolas, although François speaks excellent English, as you saw in the introduction. I just wanted to get started, François, by talking about how this project really came about. And I was interested when I read about how you had interviewed many of the principals who were involved in this movie, many of the characters and people who'd experienced abuse, so much that you were considering making a documentary. And I'm wondering how this turned into a feature film.
I had never the idea to make a film about pedophilia in the church. Actually, it came from the idea to make a film about men, about fragility of men, because I've made many films about strong women before. And this time I wanted to focus on men expressing their sensitivity, their fragility. So I was looking for a subject, and by chance I discovered on internet the testimonies of many victims of child abuse. And I was very touched, especially by the testimony by Alexander, you see first in the film. So I decided to meet him, and he came with a big folder, with a big folder with all the emails he had with the church, the French church, and he said to me, do what you want with all that. So I read that, and it was amazing because it was so strong material. And I began a kind of investigation like a journalist. And I had it was a very strong story for me because I had read some things in the French press, but the fact to meet all the people, the families, it was very moving. So my first idea, yes, was to make a documentary because these characters were like heroes for me. But I realized they were a little bit afraid to be in a documentary again because they had made so many interviews before with the press, with the television. They wanted to turn the page in a certain way. And you know, the film Spotlight was just released in France at this moment. So I think they trust me because they thought as a director of fiction, I would be maybe able to make a kind of French Spotlight. So I decided to make a fiction movie because it's what I'm able to do usually. Right. So that's how it began.
Yeah. I was also interested to know how the film was received in France when it was released. And was it released after the Berlin Film Festival in February or so? You mentioned in the introduction that it was difficult.
Yes, it was difficult. Actually, for the shooting, it was perfect because we shot the film secretly. We didn't give the real title of the film because the words "By the Grace of God" are very famous in France. If I would have said I shoot a film by the grace of God, everybody would have known it will be about the affair in Lyon about Prena. So we gave a fake title. It was called Alexander, and it was a friendship story between three men. And so nobody knew what it was about. So we was totally free to shoot what we wanted. We decided to shoot the exteriors in Lyon, but all the scene inside the church were shot in Belgium because it was impossible to ask to Cardinal Barbarin, do you allow us to shoot in your church? So for the shooting it was okay, but after when we give the real title and when people saw the trailer, they understood what it was about, and at this moment les choses sont devenues compliquées. Things became more complex because many people of the church tried to stop the release, especially the lawyer of the priest, because the priest was not judged and they wanted to postpone the release of the film. But fortunately, the justice decided that in the case of this film, the freedom of creation was more important than the presumption of innocence. So the film was released, and actually it was a huge success in France. It was about 1 million admissions, which was a great surprise for us.
And was there, I mean, this case was covered very closely by the French media and actually all over the world. And when I saw it in Berlin, obviously the titles and the end information that we get in this version of the film was very different, because since you made the film, Father Prayat was defrocked. Right?
He was defrocked, so it was a big victory for the survivors. And the Cardinal Barbarin was condemned. So I realized that the film was very helpful for the fight of the victims.
Absolutely, it's remarkable.
And for me, it was a surprise because I had never seen, I had never made a film like that. And you know, usually, very often, the journalists ask you, "Do you think cinema can change the world?" And all the directors, except the very pretentious one, say no, it doesn't change. But actually, in the case of this film, it changed many things. In the French church.
Absolutely. Can you talk about the casting of this film, because you have some wonderful French actors here, and starting with Alexander Melville Poupeau, who I think I first saw in one of Eric Romero's films, but I think goes all the way back to Raul Ruiz, right? I mean, he's a very talented actor. He's been in other films you've made, I believe. Time to Live.
Yes, I made Time to Live with him. He's very religious in life, so I knew this character could interest him. So it was quite obvious for me to propose him the part. Denis Ménochet, I worked with him too in The House. He had a small part in it, and behind his strength, he's a very fragile guy, and he was very touched by the story. And
and by the way, didn't he play the farmer in the opening scene of Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds? I mean, if you've seen that movie, that's an unforgettable
Monsieur Le
sequence.
Petit, I think that's his name. But he was less big. A little bit. Slim, it was slimmer. And for Swan Arlo, the last one, the character of Emmanuel, I didn't know him, but I had seen him in a very good French movie called Petit Paysan. I'm not sure it was released in America. And he's very sensitive, and he was very close to the character. So it was quite easy to make the. It was not easy because I knew the real person. So suddenly, when you have to make a cast knowing the real person, it changed totally your way of working because you don't want to betray the real persons.
Mm. And have you heard from the survivors after seeing this film, what they thought of it?
Yes, of course. When they saw the film, it was very disturbing for them because, you know, the story is very close. It happened it happened in 2014 to 2016. So for them, it was quite strange. They were a little bit afraid of the reactions of their family because they told me things they had never said before. You know, Alexander's wife, it was very complex for her to watch the film because her family didn't know. So it was, it was tough for some of them. But because the film was successful and people understood their fight, they were happy at the end.
I'm going to throw it out to the audience in just a minute, but I wanted to ask one more question, which was that after seeing your films, I mean, you're kind of a genre buster in a way. Like, I mean, you just work in so many different kinds of movies, and I felt that this film got off to a really interesting start in how you followed the letters, the emails between these characters, and gradually kind of, as the cases became more detailed and as more people came forward, it seemed like you were loosening your style up a bit. I mean, did you think about how you would structure this movie in a different way than you have in your other work?
I realized sometimes reality is stronger than fiction, you know, because I didn't have to invent some things, because all what I learned during the investigation was so amazing for a script writer. I didn't need to, you know, to build new things. I had just to follow the real story, you know, the structure of the films, like a relay race. Do you say that?
A relay race.
Relay
yes.
race. It came really from the reality, because Alexander began alone the fight, and after, when he realized after 2 years that nothing will change in the church, he decided to go to the justice, and then a policeman began an enquête, an
investigation.
An investigation.
Yeah.
They found François, and step by step, you know, so it was the reality. Actually, it was the producers were a little bit nervous about the structure of the film, because you are not used to see a character disappearing after 45 minutes. But
Right.
it was the challenge for me, you know, to tell the story like that.
Yeah, it works beautifully. So let's turn it over to the audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand.
Being that the subject matter was so profoundly troublesome for a lot of different people, for the church, for the people that were abused, I wondered how you got funding. How did you propose to get funding for this? Did you believe there would be financing for it, and the people who did finance it, did they have a strong belief that this was an important message, or was it just purely a quality of film that they were looking for?
It was quite difficult to finance the film, because a film about pedophilia, it's not a blockbuster usually. So we had to find the right person. But you know, it was not a big budget, and all the actors were very involved in it. So they agreed not to be paid a lot, and for the crew, it was the same thing. And we had some problem with my usual financiers, especially a French television called Canal+, which usually help all my films. In this case, they said it's impossible to make a film about pedophilia, because the director of the channel is an integrist.
Oh, he's
Integrist.
he's a
Catholic integrist.
very
Very conservative. So he
Conservative
didn't.
Catholic.
So he didn't want to finance the film. But we found some other people who thought it was important to make this film happen.
Well, thank you very much. I have a question, but I just want to mention the scene that, for some reason, moved me the most. Very brief scene when Emmanuel is at the bakery, and the baker noticed. It's just something about that just really got me. But a question I have is okay. There's the thing at the front that says, this is based on fact, but this is fiction. I'm just wondering, like I have the feeling it's pretty close, and I'm just wondering, like, if there were any things that you had to do to, I don't know. I mean, did with the reality of it, were there any changes you made or whatever? Thank you.
I made some small changes. For example, the wife of Alexander asked me not to tell exactly the truth about the fact she was abused as a child, but I followed the reality, and it was maybe naive or innocent from me, because I used the real names of the cardinal and the priest, and it was a big problem after. But I had the feeling it wouldn't have been a problem, because everything was already in the press. But I realized that the power of cinema fait peur aux gens,
frightens people.
and they decide to attack the film. If I would have made a documentary, nobody would have attacked me, I think. So it was curious to see these reactions.
In the movie Spotlight, the Catholic Church, the Archdiocese, was exposed for its covering up of pedophilia on a much larger scale. I mean, there were, at the end of the movie, one got the impression there were hundreds of priests, not a few or one, but hundreds. In the course of making this movie, did you hear from people who essentially told you that there were more than just this one father, this one priest, but that there were a number of priests who were engaged in this kind of misconduct in France?
Yes, there are many other scandals in France, but this one was very important because Cardinal Barbarin is the most important cardinal of France. You know, he could have become the Pope, the new Pope. So that's why this story was so mediatic. But some other bishops made the same mistake in some other place of France.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Congratulations. Since you didn't have that much money, I don't know what your schedule was like, how many days, but there is a sense of taking all that material first in writing that you have to reduce down and put so much in different ways. What's it like on the set in shooting the movie, or were the rehearsals an ad lib? And because you do move this along very, very quickly, but there are along the way so many nice moments. So can you talk a little bit about the process on set of making this happen?
It was a normal shooting. We had about two months, maybe a little bit less, but we had 2 months to make the film. No, it was quite easy to shoot the film because the actors were very involved. They were very touched by their parts. No, it was a normal shooting. It was not different of my other movies.
In one of the last scenes with Alexandre, Gilles, and there seemed to be like some disagreements at the end, and they didn't really seem to like think the same. Do you have like any? Why did you choose to end like that at the movie at the end?
It's not exactly the last scene. The last scene is between the father and his son. But yes, it was important that each time there is a political movement. At the moment, there are some des séparations. Je sais pas comment on dit le mot en français.
Divisions.
Oui, divisions. They don't have the same point of view. And I like the idea that these people become, they are not really friends. They wouldn't have been friends without living because they don't have the same social background, you know, they are very different. But because they share the same bad experience, being abused, they fight together. But and that's their strength, comes from that. But at the same time, there are some difference between them, and they don't have the same idea of the way of fighting. And there is a kind of melancholy in that. But it's the reality of all the political movement, I think. In fact, they are no more friends. It's difficult between them.
Thank you so much for the film and for coming. I have a question. There are a lot of people and characters involved in the case. How did you decide to choose these like 3 people as your focus?
It was quite obvious to choose Alexander and François because they are Alexander start, you know, the fight, and after it was François who built the association. After, for the 3rd character, I had more choices because there are about 70 victims who spoke out, and so I had to choose between 70 victims. So I asked to François and Alexander, I'm looking for another character different of you, maybe with a different social background, someone who was maybe not able to build a family, to have a job, and they told me you have to meet Emmanuel. And I met him, and he was very moving, and I decided to. It told me his story, and I was very touched. So I decided to tell his story.
We have one last question in back.
Thank you very much for the movie. I have always been a fan from Time to Live to 8 Women. So I noticed the detail. You have a spotlight, the movie poster in the police station. So did you put there on purpose, or it just happened to be there?
No, actually, it's funny because it's something which happened in reality. The survivors told me when we go to the police station, there was the poster of Spotlight in the office, and we were very happy because we realized the policemen were on our side. So we decided to keep it, and it was a kind of tribute to the film, which was very important for them.
Well, François, thank you so much. This is an
Thank
important
you to
film.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Film Forum Presents. Special thanks to Music Box Films for making this event possible. If you like what you just heard, please be sure to subscribe to get future episodes and rate and review so that more movie lovers can find us. Film Forum is an independent nonprofit cinema, and our doors have been kept open for nearly 50 years thanks to the invaluable support of our members and donors. Please visit www.filmforum.org for details on membership, as well as information and showtimes for our current programming. See you at the movies.